Hi everyone, Caront here, and welcome to part 2 of my cancer story. Last time I introduced myself basically, and we just talked a little bit about what I want to do with these videos here. Today, we're essentially going to talk about how I found out I had cancer. Thrilling story, I know. In a sense, the story of how I discovered my cancer can be discussed in one sentence, really. Because a lot of people, whenever they find out they have cancer, they find out via whatever means. They find out via tests, or they go in for routine medical exams and they find something happening or what have you. And so it's a little tougher for them to figure out, hey, they have cancer. Mine was patently obvious because in spring of last year, I developed a swollen lymph node on the right side of my neck. And it was not super huge, but it was fairly obvious. When I discovered it, I immediately went to the doctor because this was new, pretty much overnight, really, so I kind of freaked out a bit. Called my mom, told her. My mom's a registered nurse, so she always is the medical authority in the family. But I called her, and I was going to do it anyway, but she also recommended go to the doctor, get it looked at. So I did. So I went to an urgent care facility because I don't have a regular physician, which, by the way, if you don't have a regular doctor, get a regular doctor. It helps a lot. Anyway, so I go to a urgent care physician, and he looked at it and said, well, it's a swollen lymph node. If it doesn't go down in a while, come back and we'll take another look at it. So I leave, and 2 months pass, and nothing happens. It doesn't go down, it doesn't go up, it just kind of stays that way. So fast forward to the middle of June, and I go home to see family, my younger sister's birthday. So I went home for that weekend just to, say hi to everybody and so on and so forth. And Mom notices. She said, is this what you were telling me about earlier, a few months ago? I said, yeah, that's it. She said, okay, go get it looked at again because nothing's changed. So I did. So probably beginning of July, right around the beginning of July, I go to an ear, nose, and throat specialist because, well, throat. So I go to him, and he takes a look at it, says, okay, so we need to do a needle biopsy on it to see what's going on. So, okay. So I'll come back later. So basically, a needle biopsy, in a nutshell, is pretty much like getting a shot, except instead of sticking something in you, they take something out, which is what they did. They basically took a sample of cells from the lymph node that had swollen, and they sent it off to get tested. So fast forward a few days, a couple of days at least. I admit I don't remember the exact sequence of events as far as exactly how many days it was and whatnot, but anyway. So they send it back, or they come back with the results, and they said, okay, there's potentially an issue here. So we need to take the whole thing and study it. So that, of course, meant surgery. So I go in to the local hospital, and they're prepping me for surgery and everything. And in a lot of ways, it wasn't really anything particularly different from what you would expect from a normal surgery. It was, you fill out forms, you pay an outrageous copay, you get prepped, and they put the weird gown on you and all that stuff. All the things that they had to do to be sanitary to try to make sure everything was good to go. There are, of course, a few extra steps to get everything ready because this was in the middle of the COVID pandemic, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, I think, in a later video. So they get everything ready, and they're getting ready to knock me out because they had to, basically cut off, something hanging off of my throat. So, obviously they had to give me anesthesia to do it. One of the many ways in which I was fortunate in all of this is that I respond very well and very quickly to anesthesia. I mean, it's just, I'm gone. So they give me the good stuff, so to speak, and I was out like a light. I just remember they give me the anesthesia. I feel it starting to kick in, so I'm kind of like, there it goes, and then I'm out. And then I wake up, and it's done. So they take my lymph node, and, obviously that means a little bit of recovery, but it wasn't too bad, really. So they sent it off to get it tested, and they said they'd have the results back in probably about a week or so. I think it was something like that, probably about a week or so. So fast forward again to a week later, and of course, obviously I've been telling my family what's going on because, it was Mom who had spotted it and kind of pointed it out in the first place, and obviously I was going to keep them abreast on things going on. So they come back with the results, and I go back into the ENT physician. And he looks at me and says, okay, so your lymph node tested positive for Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I will admit, I wasn't fully aware of what that meant when he said it. And so he goes on and he talks about, okay, so we're going to need to send you over to oncology. And pretty much this is where we wash our hands of you, so to speak. Because, it's their job to take care of you now. But they'll take good care of you. And they told me who I was going to go see. And where I was going to go see them and what have you. And it still didn't really hit me. Because I wasn't really... When it came to cancer, and cancers, plural, because there are lots of them, I was familiar with probably some of the heavier ones. Leukemia, skin cancer, lung cancer, breast cancer. Stuff like that. Stuff that you really see making the big headlines, so to speak, because they tend to be very bad in a lot of cases. They tend to result in very aggressive, very long periods of chemo and radiation and all sorts of stuff. And they tend to be the stage 3, stage 4, the ones that really, really affect people. So I wasn't really familiar with what lymphoma was. I don't think I really realized it was a cancer when I first heard about it. I was the only one who didn't know that it was a cancer, apparently, because I called my mom and my sister, the older of my two sisters, the one who's always kind of been the mama, not really the mama of the family, because Mom was the mama of the family, but the older of my two sisters, who's 2 years younger than I, she was always the street smarts, very practical member of the family. Me and the younger of my two sisters were kind of the ones with our heads shoved up in the clouds. But the older of my two sisters, she was always the practical one. So I call Mom, I call her, and I tell them that the lymph node had tested positive for Hodgkin's lymphoma. And their first responses were, and I quote, shit and fuck, respectively. Which, if you know them, you wouldn't really be terribly surprised by either of those, but I think that's kind of when I first started thinking, oh crap, this could be bad. Because, well, for them to react like that just right off the bat, without any prompting whatsoever, was, So of course, this obviously meant that I needed to start getting ready for more aggressive things. And this is probably going into mid to late July at this point. I'm in the middle of what would be the summer semester, but again, in another way in which this worked out really, really well for me from a, if you want to call it lucky, fortunate, blessed, whatever standpoint. I wasn't teaching that semester because of COVID. And so I had time. I had time for all the doctor's visits. I had time to get biopsied and get knocked out in anesthesia and all that stuff. It didn't affect my teaching any because I wasn't teaching. So there's that. So this is probably like you said, mid to late July. So I start getting ready ultimately to begin meeting with my oncologist. And that's, well, in essence, going to be a story in and of itself. And I'm not going to tell that story just yet. So yes, I'm teasing y'all a bit. But part of the reason why I'm teasing y'all in terms of, I'm going to wait to tell you what everything happened with my oncologist and what have you. Because there's a good bit to the story and I want to keep it separate. And also because I want to call them and make sure I have permission to mention names specifically. Because I didn't mention my ENT physician because, frankly, I don't remember his name. Whoops. But I do very much remember my oncologist and the people that I worked or that were there. So I want to ask permission first before I start saying, oh, well, my oncologist was fill in the blank. Or her assistant, who was really nice and helped me out with a lot of things, was fill in the blank. Because, I mean, it is a privacy concern. And if they don't want me mentioning their names, I'll just say, okay, so I went to see my oncologist, or, I talked with her assistant, or, I'll keep it generic. But if they do give me permission, then I'll mention them by name, and it'll be complimentary because, sort of spoiler alert a little bit, they took real good care of me, and I don't want there to be any presumption otherwise. So, yeah, anyway, so I'm going to hold off here, actually. This is probably a little bit shorter, honestly, than I thought this video was going to be, at least in terms of part 2. But honestly, this is kind of still at the point where my memories are a little bit foggier because it's been almost an entire year. In fact, really, considering the beginning of this journey, it actually has been a full year pretty much this week as to when everything started. So my memories of this part are a little bit foggy, so forgive me. I apologize. But once we get into the next part, which is going to be basically getting ready for the beginnings of chemotherapy, my memory's a fair bit clearer. And there was a lot more going on, so it'll be longer. It'll be much longer, I think. And there will also be visual aids. I can at least guarantee that, because I actually still have one of them sitting about 15 feet away from me in my living room. So anyway, so that's the lead up. That is me ultimately discovering my cancer, or at least having it discovered for me, and it kind of starting to set in that I had cancer. So next time, we're going to talk about all the preparation, getting ready, figuring things out, getting set up for chemotherapy. Then I think the part after that, we'll talk about the chemotherapy itself and kind of what it entailed and what it did or didn't do, and so on and so forth. So thank you guys for watching. I've been just blown away, by the way, with the response to the first video. This, of course, was the first video that I'd done for YouTube in 2 years, and it was... I was surprised, and I mean, at the time of filming this, it's been released for, I think, 5 days, and I not only have had about probably 50 people, or 50 views on it, which for me is good, but I've had people asking me in my Discord and in other communities, like, hey, when are you going to do the next video? I want to hear more. I'm like, well, okay. So I've really been blown away by it, and for folks who commented who have asked questions, thank you. I would, encourage you to continue doing that. Please ask questions. Please say hello, even if it's just a comment to say hi, I watched your video, or what have you. Yeah, thank you. I mean, that obviously means a lot to any content creator, whether it's YouTube or Twitch or formerly Mixer or whatever, TikTok. Not that I'd ever use TikTok. I'm not even remotely that cool. But anyway, but any content creator would very much appreciates comments and likes and, the idea that their content is worth something. And that's, obviously I like that too. And as I mentioned at the outset, I'm doing this for me, but I'm doing this for y'all too. So, yeah, that's that pretty much. And I'm going to shut up before I blab too much longer. But thank you guys. Much appreciated as always. And I will hopefully see you guys next time for part 3 of my cancer story, getting ready for chemotherapy. And I'll try not to take a month to edit this one.